Hello, everyone. Welcome to the next edition of The Thing with me and Idylia. Say hello, Idylia.
Hello, I'm Idylia, with a much better mic.
We are talking about Neon Genesis Evangelion. I still don't know how I'm gonna split these videos. I edited episode 1, haven't done episode 2. I might do it like 2 episodes at a time for the release, and I don't know what the schedule will be or anything. I want to record a number of these before I start releasing them or anything. We are talking about episode 3. What did you think, Idylia?
I don't know, I was kind of skeptical at first, because this is one of those episodes that I didn't really remember very well. And I don't really like the way that it's structured that much, but I like a lot of the content in this episode, if that's weird. Yeah. So it's kind of contentious for me.
It's interesting you say that, because this is one of the episodes I remember best, mostly though because of the scene where Shinji screams like fucking bloody murder and stabs the enemy robot, which to me has always been just iconic. Fucking crazy vocal performance on the part of his actress. Like, goddamn. So,
yeah,
because she's conveying just like the pain of being stabbed and the ferocity and violence of just attacking this fucking thing, and you're like, shit, you know, like you're making the same face that the two kids in the cockpit are.
Exactly.
What were your troubles with this episode?
I just think the way that they structured it in terms of like the tension and the pacing and stuff, which are things that I talk about a lot when I talk about anything, because it's just the first thing that I think of,
right,
is more of a slow burn than they've done in the previous episodes. I think that's because the previous episodes were more supposed to be, you know, like an introduction to this series,
right,
and it was supposed to be, you know, fast and exciting, but also have those moments of, you know, like what Evangelion does. So it's not to say that I don't like slow burns. I don't think that it's not. I mean, they do it better in other places, but I can't really exactly put a pin on why I don't like this.
It's sort of like you can kind of recognize that this is going to be a formula. Like, you can tell that if the show is going to have a formula, this is going to be it. It's going to be because it sort of introduces a problem at the start of the episode very clearly. Like, this is what Shinji's hang-up is in this episode. And then there's an angel fight, you know, and it's like, and then it's dealt with sort of, and you get this very big sense of like, this is an episodic thing. Like, it feels, I don't know that it feels conclusive, because Shinji doesn't really progress at all in his relationship, but you definitely have the sense of like, the episode is about one thing. It's even like, I think the episode's called Hedgehog's Dilemma, and they talk about the Hedgehog's Dilemma in the episode, which is interesting because up till now there was a lot of the sort of show don't tell characterization, and this episode is a little bit more telling, like straight up just, oh, Shinji is like this. And I don't mind that. I have always been someone who thinks that the show don't tell rule, while important because it is often more interesting, should never be considered all-encompassing. Like, you don't always have to do it that way, because when you write dialogue, characters are going to talk like people, and people talk about each other. You know, we describe each other. We center conversations on each other, and it might be a little bit out of the blue that they were just having a conversation about Shinji, but, you know, just to, like, exposit what they think about him. But, I don't know, I thought it was fine, and I thought it was funny. They don't translate this quite properly, but when Ritsuko first calls, what's her name? Misato. Ritsuko calls her, she says the word kareshi, which typically means boyfriend. So she's kind of saying, like, how's your boyfriend doing? And that's why she's like, him? Oh, Shinji. Because she's like, boyfriend?
Right.
Oh, him, you know. So there's a little bit of that, like, playful teasing between them again that I thought was lost in translation a little.
Yeah, I didn't actually get that.
Which those two are so much, you know, they make great, like, they're simultaneously, you know, opposites but friends, but you still get the sense that there's a good reason they're friends. They don't just feel like they have good chemistry together, is what I'm saying.
Exactly. And it's hard to write characters that are foils with naturally flowing dialogue like they have, which is good, because you kind of get the feeling that when Ritsuko is talking to Katsuragi, that she's kind of like channeling her inner Katsuragi to like appeal to her in some way, and a little bit vice versa. That's how I've always felt that their dynamic is, that they kind of just like over the years taught each other how to be like each other a little bit, which is actually kind of how friendships work, in my opinion.
Definitely. I would easily say that because I have a lot of friends and they're all very different, and I definitely act very differently talking to any of my friends, so I totally get that, and that's an interesting observation. I never really have picked up on that before. Then again, it's been fucking 6 years since I watched the show, but nonetheless, I probably wouldn't have picked up on that.
I did want to talk a little bit about the show versus tell thing that you brought up, because being somebody who likes writing, show versus tell is like the first thing you tell anybody, basically. And I've come to sort of think that it's not like a law. Show versus tell is definitely not a law, like you said, but the times where like telling is better than showing is usually most done because pacing is fast and you don't have time to, create these long elaborate scenes to tell you why a character is doing a certain thing, or give context or backstory or anything like that. Like in the middle of a fight scene, like you'd never just stop and in other animes,
you
in the middle of a fight,
never stop.
Yeah, exactly.
But when you're watching Naruto or something, then that's the entire reason I can't watch shonen action shows. Is I can't handle expose. Like, it doesn't bother me that they expose things, but why is it in the middle of the fight?
Yeah, that's exactly the example I was going to use, as Naruto, because that was like the first anime I ever watched. But yeah, and it's weird because I mentioned earlier that I think that this episode is a lot deliberately slower paced.
Yeah.
Which I didn't necessarily think that they were like telling to a fault.
Right.
But they could have used to go into the Hedgehog's Dilemma a little bit more, but I understand why they didn't, because they obviously have plans to go more into the Hedgehog's Dilemma as this gets.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, it is a little redundant, I guess, because we get it. We didn't really need them to set it up for us to get that Shinji is a loner and doesn't talk to anyone, we kind of see, like, she tells us Shinji's situation, and then we see it unfold. So there is somewhat of a redundancy. I almost feel like part of this was just, like, the writer having this idea of the Hedgehog's Dilemma and just wanting it in the script,
Yeah.
Which is kind of bad in a way. It's kind of that symptom that a lot of stories fall into, where they're so excited to tell you this thing they learned in psychology class today that they have to explain it to you before showing you how it affects the story, so could be a little bit of that, but I don't know. I also don't know if the Hedgehog's Dilemma is even actually a psychological, like, a real thing. I remember.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I remember finding it super interesting when I was a kid, but then I was like, as I've studied psychology a little bit over the years, I've never seen it brought up anywhere. So I feel like it's either something invented for this show, or something like maybe unique to Japan, or just not a legitimate psychological thing. Because I mean, what would we call that? We just call that social anxiety. Like, that would be the actual psychological name for it. Which is why it's a little weird that Ritsuko would come, like, have this parable, and she's like a doctor. You'd think she'd know the actual. Oh yes, that is called social phobia, or he has a developmental issue. Why do the smart people in his life not get it? But at the same time, you sometimes feel that way in the real world, where it's like, you have friends who are super intelligent and they don't get you at all. But
I can see why they framed it as the Hedgehog's Dilemma, though, because personally, when I hear the Hedgehog's Dilemma and you think about, two hedgehogs that are trying to hug each other but are stabbing each other, like, that sticks a lot more in your mind than, random sterile medical term number 37 for this disorder. From a
storytelling standpoint, certainly, it's better to understand. And maybe she was dumbing it down for Misato.
That's a good point.
Something that she'd understand better.
Ironically, though, this episode is called The Hedgehog's Dilemma, but, like, the first thing that happens to him is that he gets hurt when, like, by somebody who doesn't understand him,
Yeah.
Toji kind of, like, kicks his ass, and he doesn't even really get why Shinji is doing what he's doing, understand anything like it. So it's kind of gives the impression that, like, Shinji doesn't get it either way.
Yeah. Like, he doesn't get the love or he just gets the pain.
Yeah.
I guess the reason I like this episode a lot is that I love the sort of moral it's portraying, which is that you should not really get upset at people when you don't understand the context of their situation. And I might go on a little bit of a tangent here because this is a really big deal for me, because I listen to people talk about people a lot, right? And you probably do too. We all do, right? Because you watch the news or something, and let's say a news story comes on, and it's about some, like, audacious crime or something you hear. And whoever's in the vicinity, whoever's watching the news report, whoever's talking about it at work, if you've ever worked a normal job you've hung out in the break room, you've definitely heard people talk about the news. And they are so quick to just, oh, wow, I can't believe someone would do that. Why would they do that? Blah, blah, blah. But that's when we come to, I think this is what the concept of a paradigm shift is, where when they find out the context, it can completely change the way you think of them. Where it can be like, wow, I can't believe he sucker punched that guy. Like, what a dick. How could he do that? But then you find out that there was, like, this elaborate reason behind it, and it all makes sense. And then you go, oh shit, now I sympathize with the guy. So the best example of this, by the way, there's a French film called Irreversible, that's somewhat infamous for the fact that, like, it's told in reverse. And it starts off with the main character just, like, brutally fucking murdering this guy, like, hunting him down and beating the shit out of him. And it's disgusting, right? You're just like, oh my god, why is he doing this? This guy's an ass. And as the movie is told backwards, he's doing, like, this revenge plot and, like, killing all these people and shit. And you're just like, what the fuck? This dude, he's just a monster. But then you find out that what had happened before was that his girlfriend had been raped by these people. Like, there's this fucking 10-minute rape scene in this movie. It's like the most disturbing, horrific rape scene put to film. And the people he'd been killing all this time were the people who did that to her. And you're just like, God, this is so fucked. And then when it gets back to the beginning of the movie, you see, like, the super happy life this guy had, or the end of the movie, but the beginning of the story, his life with his girlfriend, how she had just found out she was pregnant and stuff, And the reason it's told in reverse that way is because it gets you to think about context. Because in a normal revenge film, you would have already felt for this guy. You would have been on his side. You would have seen his great relationship with his wife. And then when she got raped and everything, you would have been super satisfied when he killed the bad guys. Because you would have been like, oh yeah, he's fucking getting revenge.
Right.
But because it's told in reverse and you don't have that context, you're just like, what the fuck is happening? This guy's a dick. And then you find out the truth and you're like, oh God. And you don't feel good about anything. In the end, you just feel miserable about everything that's happened. There's no gratification for the violence. So it's all about that paradigm shift, that change in context, and how that affects the way you look at people. So Toji just sees, oh, fuck, this pilot kid doesn't know what he's doing. My sister got hurt, But as soon as he's in the cockpit, it's like, oh, shit, like, this is just so far beyond what I thought about it. It turns out once I know the context, it's like this whole different story. So I love that. I love commentating on that.
I mean, like I said at the beginning, I really like that moral as well. I like all the content that they have in this. I like what they portray, and I like how they do it. And I think especially the ending is really visceral, and like, you get Shinji screaming at that robot for 30 seconds, and you're just like, oh shit. And you finally like kind of understand what being in the robot does to him.
Right.
As if you hadn't got it from the last two episodes.
Yeah.
I mean, there's the emotional and the physical now.
That's a great way to just, like, think about the transition there from, like, the show don't tell. Like, we're throughout the episode we're getting told things, but then when it comes to, like, actually showing Toji, it's like Shinji, he doesn't, because he never does explain himself to Toji. He could, like, he says, oh, I didn't choose to pilot the robot, and that just makes Toji go like, oh, fuck you, like, my sister got hurt and you're worried about yourself, blah, blah. But then when he actually sees it, it's like, this is totally different. Like, I get it now. It's not just Shinji telling him, oh, I got called out here for no reason and my daddy doesn't love me. It's like, once he sees it, then he understands.
You know my favorite part of this episode, though, like, above and beyond everything else, is that I just really appreciate Kensuke. Like, I feel like Kensuke is a wise motherfucker as a child.
Yeah, the guy with the kid with the glasses.
Yeah.
The fact that he makes fun of Toji, yeah.
And he just, like, lays it down like it is throughout the episode to Toji, and he reels him back in.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, who do you know that could... Actually, I was going to say, who do you know that would do that? But then I thought about it, and it's me. Like, I do that to my friends when I get mad at them. Because my friends, some of them are hot-headed. You know, some of them are like that, where they'll just be like, oh my god, fuck that guy, you know, I can't believe him. And I'll just be like, you realize that you're trying to ruin this guy's life. This guy probably has kids at home he's trying to feed. He's trying to, you know, he's like this nice guy who just happened to have a bad day and drove into the wrong lane for 2 seconds, and you're gonna yell at him. You know, I'll guilt my friends that way. So yeah, he's definitely a cool character.
I agree, and I think he only gets cooler, like, remembering what comes next and all that other stuff. But I also think it's pertinent to mention that this is kind of like the first episode where it's weird that the angel is not necessarily the source of the conflict. It kind of is, but the context for, like, why it's so hard on Shinji, it doesn't come from the angel. Like, the angel's just this weird thing, and everything else comes from his life.
That might be part of why the angel designs are so... Because the angel designs are kind of infamous in this show, because most of them are just really stupid looking. Like, they're not really memorable, they don't stand out as villains or anything, because most of them aren't that... You know, they're not important. Like, this angel was not... this focus, it did, like, what it could do did not really matter. He's just something that he's gonna kill, and it's gonna, you know, further his relationship with Toji, like you said. So yeah, maybe that's why it's so just there and, like, not really interesting to look at, is because they don't want you to pay attention to the angel and the fight. They want you to pay attention to what's happening with Shinji.
That's a good point, and I kind of actually, to, like, take back what I just said a minute ago, which is already horrible. I said that this is the first episode that does that, but thinking back to the first episode, it's kind of the same way, which I think is kind of what sets Eva apart from other mecha animes, is that it's not about these two giant nations in conflict with each other necessarily. It's about, like, the interpersonal relationships really more than anything else.
It's not really about... The conflict itself is just a backdrop for character development. And again, this is something that a lot of people aren't going to know going into it, and they're going to be like, why are the fights, like, 2 seconds long and boring? But at the same time, it leads to, like... Because, you know, in the first episode, or the second episode, rather, when Eva fights Ramiel, it's pretty badass. Like, it's a great mecha action scene. This episode's scene is not a great action scene, but it's fucking intense and memorable for the emotional weight it has, you know, that it's just a kid screaming for 30 seconds straight. And, like, that's all it really is. He screams, he stabs the angel. It kind of is, like, it's almost shitty, because the angel just stands there, like, with a knife in its gut, like, just fucking dying for the last 10 seconds. But you still remember it, because it's so intense. And the screaming is so visceral, and the looks on the kids' faces when they're just like, oh my god, you know?
Yeah.
Misato, who's like, you know, he disobeyed orders, but what can she even say at this point?
Yeah.
You know? So, to talk a little bit about symbolism in this, because I thought it was funny. Did you notice anything sexual about the angel?
About this angel?
Yes.
Not really, except that it had tentacle hands, which is already kind of an extrapolation of sexuality.
Right. It kind of looks like a giant dick.
Oh.
Just a bit. Looks like a giant penis. Because it has, like, the head, and it's kind of bulbous, and it's got tentacles that come out of it, and it's a giant dick. And the reason I came to that conclusion is because it appears right after Misato says, like, it's like she says, like, it doesn't care about our feelings, it just, you know, shows up whatever it wants. And she says, that's the kind of guy us girls hate the most. And then it shows up, and it's a giant penis. And I'm like, this is like a giant rape metaphor. Like, you know, he's showing up when unwanted, just being a big dick and, you know, trying to fuck them. And Misato's like, that's the kind of guy we hate the most. I was like, wow, that's the most blatant sexual metaphor so far by a long shot. And, you know, and it kind of, you know, just it's a giant rape monster, and it tries to rape Shinji, and it cuts his umbilical cord, which is another kind of symbolism, because I've always loved that they call the, if you're plugged into the base, it's called the umbilical cord for obvious reasons. It serves the same function. But then there's the sort of metaphorical, it cuts his umbilical cord, and then Shinji goes and does his own thing. Like, he was just directly following orders, aim the thing, shoot, aim the thing, shoot. They send up the new gun. He's like, I'm going to pick up the new gun. I'm going to aim the thing, shoot. Then they cut the umbilical cord, and then he goes off on his own and does his own thing. So it's sort of like Shinji was born in combat at that moment. Because if you think about it, he didn't fight in the first 2 episodes. Eva fought on its own. It went berserk. Shinji did jack shit. He starts off the battle, just point the gun and shoot. His umbilical cord gets cut, and then he's born in battle and attacks on his own. He has now developed his own fighting instinct. So yeah, fun little metaphor going on there.
That's a really cool deconstruction of what that is. I hadn't really thought about that.
Yeah, I got stuck on this umbilical thing, and I was like, oh, he's growing up, or at least being born.
Alrighty. I don't really have anything else to say about this personally. So.
I've got a couple more notes here. So one thing, the Hedgehog's Dilemma. What I love about it is not specifically like how it's used in the episodes. I mean, literally Shinji's personality, let's say. Because I don't want to keep calling it the Hedgehog's Dilemma, because I'm not yet ready to like say, oh, the show pinpointed that one just right. It's like, well, that's kind of sounds like an oversimplification of, his character. So, but in any case, in this episode, Shinji Ikari, he's such a blank slate, just like you said in the last podcast, a follower. He follows what people tell him or what they say to do. And in the classroom scene, by the way, third impact happened in the far off year of 2000, and everyone in class has an instant messenger that looks like it was from the 80s, and that shit cracks me up.
Yeah.
But
I think you meant second impact though.
Oh yeah, the second impact. It happened in the 2000 AD. Like, why would you set it like 5 years after when you're writing the show? But anyway, they send the email, and he's like, yes, I pilot the giant robot. And then immediately, everyone in class is super interested in him, right? Yeah. And if Shinji was a social animal, he could have capitalized on that and been friends with everyone. Everyone loved him in that moment. But all he does is shy away. He gives these like minute answers. He doesn't talk to anyone. He doesn't give out his phone number. He doesn't interact. The only person who interacts with him is the guy who beats the shit out of him. And when you look at later on, he's in the mecha, and he's like, why am I about to go out here and fight? Even though my dad is gone, even though I got beat up. Those are the only 2 things he mentions. Never mind that everyone in class thought he was amazing. Never mind that everyone wanted to be his friend. All he thinks about is, and I got beat up. It just kind of shows how he just highlights the negatives. It doesn't even register with him that he really was in a great position. Like, the robot could have made him a celebrity with lots of friends, and he could have been great. But instead it's, I got beat up.
Yeah, that's actually good. I had like a similar thing about like Hedgehog's Dilemma, It's kind of ironic that even in his social life, when he tells people that he pilots the robot, all it brings him is the things that he doesn't want is attention, and getting beat up, I guess, is more negative attention. And up until this point, we've been told that attention is something that he can do without, essentially. So I kind of felt the same way, but not with as much specifics as you.
Alright, so that about covers all we have to say about this episode, I think. So we will move on to episode 4. This is Digi and Idylia yet again, probably still the same video being watched. Anyway, this is episode 4 of Neon Genesis Evangelion, and I'll preface this by stating that this is often considered the make-or-break episode for the series for a lot of people, because it's the slow one where Shinji runs away and nothing happens. So, for people who don't like the show, this is pretty much the episode where they realized they weren't going to like the show. And for some people, like Brony Curious, who watched the show about 6 months ago, he was like, episode 4 is when I realized that I loved this show. So, what did you think?
Me? I hate to be like, I hate to jump on the train, but I didn't really like this episode that much. I feel like I almost gave, like, undue criticism to the last one because, like, a lot of the issues that I had initially and I didn't really know how to express with that one were sort of issues in this one as well, but without all the content that I liked. But there was some good stuff, like, and I appreciate something when it does something so radically different to make a point, which is what I think that this episode is doing, is completely throwing away typical, like, structure of anime and almost stories in general to, like, give us this slice of life almost taste of what Shinji's feelings are. I don't know. I don't want to lie and say that I liked it though, because I didn't really like it.
I guess I can relate because, there's lots of things I found interesting about it, and I like the pacing a lot. I like that sort of slow burn, that, like, sit there and feel this sort of emotional core to it, but at the same time, I don't know that it did enough in the episode to warrant that, Like,
right.
Did we need to have Shinji run away twice to learn the lesson? And it did sort of feel like it was a little bit padded out. Maybe we didn't need him to wander the entire countryside for the entire episode. But, again, I don't dislike it. I just, I acknowledge that it's not necessarily so great. The whole episode is all meaningful,
Right.
It's not necessarily that. But it is an interesting technique, and I don't hate it. So, anything you have to say about it?
Well, first I want to clarify exactly what I mean by that, because I think that the number one most important thing that this episode does is it gives us more characterization for Katsurugi and Toji and Kensuke, right. I actually feel like the stuff that we get from Shinji is a little bit redundant in the scope of the last episode, which is the reason that I don't really like this one that much, is because I feel that the majority of it was focused on Shinji, and if they wanted to characterize those other characters, they could have done it with Shinji either learning something new or, like, doing something new.
I mean, I appreciate making him sort of... It's kind of like the Fluttershy argument from My Little Pony, where a lot of people don't like Fluttershy because they see her as not really progressing as a character. But kind of that's the point, is that it's not that easy to just get... Like, you can't just learn to get over social anxiety like that and then you're done. It's sort of an ongoing process, and you very slowly see Fluttershy develop and change over the series, but she does have to kind of keep learning the same lesson again and again. This isn't necessarily an explanation of this, but one of my favorite quotes from Hideaki Anno about the show, and I know we're not necessarily supposed to use his words, even if he even tells you not to use his, but when he was doing the rebuild of Evangelion Project, which are the new movies that retell the story, then right before releasing the first one, they had a website up, and he had, like, this big sort of opening statement, like, about why they were doing the rebuild of Eva. And at one point he says, Evangelion is a story that's all about, like, a constant rise and fall of sort of meeting challenges again and again. It's the idea is that it's not just a simple, I became awesome and now I'm awesome. It's more like, you really have to fight. You have to keep pulling yourself back up. You keep getting knocked down. You keep pulling yourself up. And I think that's true in way more human than just a character arc, because most of us go through that. We continually have the same issues. Even if we beat back our anxieties one day, they're probably going to come back before long, And
actually,
yeah.
Sorry. Actually, that's pretty good context, because I mean, when you put it like that, I can see, why they did this, and I think that's the reason that I was kind of unsure. And why I feel like I don't like this episode is because I found myself asking, like, why a lot, and I couldn't necessarily give myself a very good answer. So, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, there's definitely an element to which, if you're analyzing the episode, you're going to find things that are interesting, but at the same time, I don't think it's all defensible as, like, all good ideas, I absolutely hate when people say, "Oh, it's amazing. It has its flaws, but it's amazing." Everything has its flaws. Like, no matter what, depending on your perception, you're always going to find something that is, a little off in a story. And, it's really about whether the story's interesting. And this episode is definitely interesting, but there's no question that it didn't need to be 22 minutes of him wandering the countryside. Like, it really could have been shorter, and it could have made the same point, I think.
Yeah.
But there are some interesting elements to it. I've got some notes. First of all, though, can we just talk about Shinji on the train, and he's listening to a tape deck. Mm-hmm. This is like the year 2045 or some shit.
Yes.
And he's listening to an old school tape deck. This show was made in 95. Didn't they have Walkmans, like CD players? So he's using a tape. I was like, is he a hipster? I couldn't help but notice it sounded like really bad 80s new wave music.
Right.
So I don't know what was up with that. Maybe he's just, into the retro scene or something.
You know what I always thought from when I watched this episode is that, and this is just, I don't know if this is something that has actually been confirmed or anything like that, but I've always seen the tape deck as something unexplained from his past life, because all we know he starts essentially the journey with the tape deck, and all we know is that his dad is this enigmatic figure that he doesn't have a connection with, and at this point we don't even know anything about his mom. And so when the first time I watched the Eva rebuilds, I connected the tape deck to his dad for some reason in my mind. They never explained it or anything like that, but I got the feeling that, like, maybe the tape deck was given to him by one of his parents, and the reason he keeps listening to that same track is because, like, he feels like that's the one thing that he has from them.
It's a great headcanon, for sure, like, to actually put some significance to it, because it could very well... His parents are from, they've been around since before the second impact, so and there's definitely reason to think they would have it.
I'm going to watch out in the episodes later on when they do, the like flashbacks to the college days of the parents basically and Katsurugi. I'm going to watch, because if that tape deck ever appears anywhere, like on a desk or anything, I'm just exactly. I'm going to be like, it's confirmed. I don't care.
Did you notice that the movie Shinji's watching is about the second impact?
I did notice that, but I cared a little bit more about what he was watching. You know what I'm saying?
The makeout scene in front of him.
Yeah. I think it's kind of a good symbolism of his character, is like he's wrapped up in this like big, like exciting conflict, and all he cares about is watching these two people have like a meaningful connection that still eludes him. Definitely.
It was a very symbolic moment. I kind of felt there's definitely that pang of jealousy thing, and this was a very real moment. And I don't mean for me, because I personally never notice anyone doing anything around me, but I see all the time on like Tumblr and shit where people who have social anxiety will talk about how much it pisses them off when they see other people having fun in public. Like when you see happy couples and it just like makes you wish you had that kind of thing. I got the sense that's what this was. And it's funny because for me, my first instinct is to be like, oh god, because it's such a like 14-year-old emotion, like that feeling of, oh, other people are happy, fuck them, But then I think about it, I'm like, yeah, but that's so real. It's him. He's 14. He's this depressed kid. Like, I get it. That's I can't really fault him for that. It's just kind of like something, and I think that's a big thing of what this episode is trying to show you, is that he's a child. And this is something that it touched on in episode 1, but it's really trying to bring that back where, like, when Misato grills him, he's an ass about it. And she knows he's being an ass about it, right? And he's very successful at being an ass about it. He's trying to push her away. He's trying to, that phrase I just used, successful at being an ass, that's something that I have described when... because I know people who are like that, who have like social problems, and they'll try to purposely push you away by acting like an asshole. And even if you know they're doing it, if they do a good job, you're not going to keep talking to them. Like, it's going to piss you off, you know? Like, even if you know that they need your help, even if you know that it's really just an outcry, if they keep doing it, it's going to be effective. It's going to piss you off. And I feel like, you know, he just kind of got to Misato that way, where she was so sick of his shit that she's like, I can't, I just want to smack you. But then she kind of stands back and realizes, you know what? But he's a kid and he really doesn't know how to communicate. You know, like, she really gets that. She's like, that's the only way he knows how to talk. And so she's like, I got to go try this again, you know?
Yeah.
But the lucky thing is that he actually, you know, recognizes, oh, hey, I have established meaningful connections here. Like, these two guys actually care about me. And the best moment in the episode, and it's so understated. That's the funny thing about the show, is that it can be so blatant sometimes and then do something like really subtle that's awesome.
Yeah.
And in this case, it's the scene where he punches, what's his fucking name?
Toji.
The scene where he punches Toji in the face. Because the idea of the hedgehog's dilemma is that when you pull someone closer, you're going to hurt them more.
Yeah.
But what Toji shows him is, you can hurt me and we'll still be friends. And that's what Shinji has to learn, because he's scared that if he hurts people, they're not going to like him anymore. I think that's what it is more than anything, is that it's not that he's scared of himself getting hurt. He's scared of him hurting other people. And Toji shows him, you can hurt me all you want. I'm going to stay with you, you know?
Right.
You can punch me in the face and we're going to be best pals, you know? And you get that when they smile at him after he punches him. And Toji tells him, you know, I'm with you. I'm by your side. And Shinji's like, holy fuck, it's like world-shattering for him. Yeah. And that's when he's the one who calls out, I'm the one who should be getting punched. I'm the one who's an asshole. I'm the one who's, you know, inauthentic.
Right. Which kind of shows, like, which kind of reaffirms the point, like, he's okay with demeaning himself as long as nobody else is caught in the crossfire.
I think I might have mentioned this in one of the other podcasts, but maybe not. I mentioned it at some point in the last few days to someone, but I think the most dangerous kind of way a person can be is thinking that they suck. Because if someone thinks that they suck, then they don't care what you think about them. And as a result, they won't try to be better, you know? Like, if I say, oh, I'm just a piece of shit, nothing I do matters, and then someone else, like, wants to be friends with me or something, but I can hurt them and, you know, be like, oh, well, I was going to lose you anyway, so it doesn't matter. You know, like, that's the kind of danger that comes from self-loathing, is that if you don't care about enough yourself to protect the things that are important to you, then you'll lose things, you know? And I feel like Shinji has that problem, where he hates himself, so he doesn't care what other people think about him or how it affects his relationships when he says these things. And so he's willing to just, you know, be an ass and throw it all away.
And even be like a self-cognizant ass, in a way. Because I think the most important word that he said when he was doing that little fit with the nerve personnel, like, grappling onto him and stuff, is that he called himself a jerk. And the whole time, like, I didn't catch that the first time. I didn't really pay that much attention. But, like, I don't really think in any sense of the word Shinji is, like, you know, a jerk.
Yeah. I mean, he's really a good guy when you think about it. Everything he's done has been ultimately great. He's trying to save the world. He's trying to protect people. He's trying to protect Rei, so...
Yeah, and, like, you remember that line where he says, it seems unrealistic to force everything onto her?
Right.
And it's like he doesn't even realize that that's exactly what they're doing with him.
Yeah, well, I think he kind of did.
Right.
I think that was part of why he said it that way, is to be like, you know, to like rub it in her face that it's unrealistic to expect this out of them, you know?
That's a good interpretation, I guess. The way that I saw it was, I don't know. The way I saw it was like a kind of like he puts everybody else on a pedestal except for himself.
Yeah, that's probably also true. Some other notes I have here. Misato at the beginning of the episode, interestingly, doesn't tell, like, she tells Shinji's friends, oh, he's at Nerve, even though she knows that he's run away.
Yeah.
And I feel like she was trying to, I don't know, not sure what she was doing there. Like, did she just not realize that, you know, feeling the connection to these kids would help him? Maybe she was scared that they were going to drag him back. I really don't know what she was going for there, but she clearly didn't understand what those kids could have meant to Shinji.
Well, I think if you think about it, at this point, you can kind of say that probably she knows Shinji the best out of all of them. Right. And she knows Shinji so well that she would know that they don't like Shinji doesn't want those kids to think it's their fault that he's run away. Because if you remember, the last thing that happened was that Toji kicked his ass, and he still hasn't got a chance to apologize. And so...
That's a good point.
She doesn't know that, though, so I don't know if you can really make that argument that explicitly, but that's kind of the way that I thought about it, was that she was trying to sort of, like, save face for Shinji.
Yeah. Could be. It's a weirdly open to interpretation scene. Like, there's really no direct context the show gives you as to why she turned them away, but there's a lot of things you can postulate about it.
Yeah.
Can we talk about Kensuke? You mentioned in the last episode you thought he was really mature and interesting of a character.
Yes.
In this episode, I couldn't help but notice, and this is some shit I never would have caught, like, growing up, but I totally get it now, that he very deliberately establishes connections with Shinji. Yeah. Like, mindfully. He's not just... Because as a kid, I just thought he was like, oh, hey, Shinji, you happen to be out here where I play make pretend, and then they become friends. But it's really not like that. He says to himself, oh, it's the new kid. But when he calls out, he says, Ikari. And it's the first time anyone has said his name. Throughout the entire episode 3, they all call him New Kid, Tenkosei, which means transfer student. Mm-hmm. And they all keep calling him New Kid, New Kid, New Kid. And then at this scene, he says Ikari, and Shinji turns his head, and then that's when it shows the, like, the mid-episode mark. So, like to highlight that moment. Mm-hmm. And so he calls out his name, and then when they're talking... Like, Shinji never, talks about himself, but Kensuke keeps asking him questions because he knows that Shinji will answer. And he tells him things. He says, oh yeah, I don't have a mom either. And then he says, I'm just like you, Shinji. Like, he's really stressing this, we are connected, we are similar, I understand you. And I know he was doing it on purpose. Like, it was not an accident.
The word I used specifically last episode that I still think is true is wise, because I think this kid is weirdly cognizant of what he can do, and I don't know. I really like his character.
Yeah, and I think that while rare, that is I've known some people like that, like some people at his age who can do that, and it's always impressive to me. Like, anytime someone gets how to, like, talk to other people and, like, make them think things, it's such a great power to have, and to use it for good that way is pretty interesting.
Oh, absolutely. And, like, a personal story of mine relating to that is kind of like when I was in middle school, I had the problem that a lot of middle school kids have, that I just couldn't make friends who liked the same kind of stuff that I liked, which is weird because all I really did was play video games. And you think middle school kids play a lot of video games, but it's kind of hard for me. And so I ended up making a lot of friends online and not very many in school. And I would always come to these kids who are like 2-3 years older than me at the beginning of the day feeling like shit. And I'd go to bed like with this smile on my face, like there's finally someone out there who can, like talk to me and understand what I'm going through and give me advice that I feel like I can use.
Right.
And so, I mean, definitely, which I guess might be why I like Kensuke so much, because, I don't know, in a way, like, writer's intuition tells me that you latch onto a character because of their flaws, right, of their vulnerabilities, because you can relate to them. But in some ways, Kensuke is kind of just like the perfect friend character, because we can all relate to having the friend who can say things that makes us right. You don't need flaws for that.
Yeah, I don't think it's accurate to say that you connect to characters through their flaws. It's just through things you relate to. Because I often connect to characters mostly through their strengths, I often will see a character who I'm like, oh, he's a badass in this specific way, and I'm a badass in that way. Maybe it's because I'm overconfident and, like, I really like myself, but, I will often connect to characters as much through their strengths as their flaws, and that's why I immediately connected to Kensuke so much, because, like, in the last episode where I was like, oh yeah, that's kind of like that thing I do sometimes to my friends, and and with the connections as well, I have done it in the past. I won't say it's something I've been doing lately, because I kind of have too many connections, but definitely there's a sense of, when you see someone who's down in the dumps, you try to throw them a line, like, throw them something like, oh, hey, we can connect, we can relate, this is a thing, we can talk about. And that brings me to my last note that I have, which is that one of the things that interests me about Shinji is, and this is something that only slowly becomes clearer over the series, I think, is that he's not just, like, he's definitely not, like, normal, right? He's not, neurotypical, let's say. He's definitely suffering from some kind of depression. He definitely doesn't get along like most people do. Yeah. But I also think that he's just not like the kind of, let's say, most kids we know, probably, who are 14, who are depressed and reclusive, sit in their room all the time and don't do anything. Shinji has elements of that, but in this episode, he runs away. And he just, like, takes a shitload of transit across country. He sleeps in public areas. He sleeps on, like, benches and stuff. And I kind of feel like it's interesting and kind of ballsy of him, Like, he gets out. He goes on an adventure. He doesn't really think of it. It's not necessarily meaningful, or if it is, it's mostly introspective. But he gets out, and he goes and does things. And it just says to me that he's definitely more out there than we even would give him credit for. Like, he's pretty out there, and he's haunted. There's a scene where he just starts tripping in the middle of the street. Like, he just hears, like, all these sounds, and he basically has, like, a borderline anxiety attack just standing there, and it gives you the sense that, yeah, this kid is deeply disturbed. It's not just, like, 14-year-old typical bitchy drama, which is something that can be underestimated anyway,
Right.
I tend to make fun of the whole, like, I'm 14 and so disturbed thing because I went through it, and because I try to put so much distance between myself now and myself back then, that I think I kind of just make it all out to be, oh, it's so dumb. But the emotions are real at the time. And Shinji definitely is going through a lot of shit. A lot of people will call him whiny or bitchy or, oh, I can't believe he runs away. But it's like, this kid is fucking in pain, He's haunted by something. He's driven to run away across epic stretches of, distance. And that's interesting to me. That's not just what an introvert does. This is something deeper than that.
That's a really good, I really like that extrapolation. I don't really know what else to say, but
I think it kind of just bleeds through every once in a while with Shinji. Like, you'll see that extra layer of psychosis every once in a blue moon. And I think it comes through whenever they do finally explain, like, where he's been. It's like, because he's, like, living with a guy who I guess he called, like, his teacher or something, just, like, out in, like, a cabin in the middle of nowhere or something like that. Yeah. Like, he definitely is not just some school kid. He's a little bit more out there than that, and I find that kind of interesting.
And I think all of that focus on him being weird kind of makes the whole, like, he's starting to make friends and make connections, and, like, the revelation that happens later in the plot where he starts talking about how piloting the Eva has given him everything. And I think we'll probably talk about that more when we actually get there, but it kind of makes that whole journey a lot more satisfying, but, like, in a weirdly unrelatable way. Like, I feel like it's a little bit misguided to say that relating to Shinji is something that you should do naturally, because I mean, you can just point to the outcry that people have had, that people call him, like, a pussy and a bitch and he runs away. Right. If there's so many people who feel that way about him, obviously there's a lot of people who don't understand where his character is coming from. So, I don't know.
I do think that, like, relating to Shinji may suggest, because, I mean, I don't want to sit here and be like, I was so weird, but, like, when I was 14, I was pretty fucking out there myself, like, I was at a point of borderline, like, just, like, psychosis, like, all the time, so when I watched the show, I connected to that sort of out there-ness, and I guess because I've known a lot of people who have similar, sort of psychosis to me because of
Yeah.
the internet and because I can, find other people who are similar. And then I think of it as a little bit more normal than it actually probably is. Like, it's probably a very low percentage of people are like Shinji tier of, like, psychosis at 14, and I got this sense that he's an outlier. He's not just any kid, and I've said that about myself in the past. I've always considered myself to be a bit of an outlier. Like, the way I grew up is not like how other people grew up, and I think Shinji is the same. He's not, it's just not that normal. There's certain things that are just, you can relate to him, but at the same time, no one really can. And I think that's what justifies some of the, like, the way that he's so intense, like that he goes into such a deep psychosis, and then he has these big outbursts and these outlandish moments, and it's like, it's because he's really that far out there, and it's interesting to present a character like that in a show like this and not make that clear at first.
Right. It's definitely a totally new take on character than what people would normally think of. Because if you think of almost any other media, characters generally, if there's a cast of enough of them, have like a polarizing defining feature. In fact, like, probably the best example that we can give at this point is My Little Pony, because all your followers are probably familiar with that.
Right.
And so immediately, even in the first season, before we get really like, pushing each character into a place where they're really, really not comfortable. You get that idea of there's a certain character trait that defines this person, and that's literally written into the Bible of the show with the elements of harmony.
Right.
But there's no singular character trait that you can use to define Shinji, or I would say Rei or Asuka, who comes later on, which is fantastic. It's like...
Yeah, another interesting point there, Rei has not really been introduced yet at all.
That's true. I don't think we've ever talked about Rei.
She hasn't had a line of dialogue yet. All she's done is sit on a bench.
She had that one line about, we got an emergency call, and then she just walked, I'll respond to it, and she walked off, and that was it. Which I think is totally intentional. Because Rei is meant to be this mystery, enigma. And even when she gets an episode, I think her episode is next, actually.
The next episode is Rei 1 out of 3, which are across the show. There's Rei 1, Rei 2, Rei 3.
I've never felt a sense of closure for Rei, though, ever. Right. I feel like they could give her every episode, and I still wouldn't understand exactly what.
Hopefully, we're going to try to get to the bottom of that throughout this. Because I'll definitely say that the first time I watched the show, I should mention that when I first watched it in 2006, I watched it, was it 2006, 2005? Something like that. I watched it dubbed. And so I watched it the English dub, and I watched it all in one go. So even though, to me at the time, it was super powerful, I super related to Shinji and all that stuff, it was also like a really visceral, emotional experience of watching the show. Like, the whole thing went by, and all I was thinking about is my connections to Shinji, the cool stuff that was happening, and this is way before I was nearly as analytically minded as I am now. And for a while, I didn't get Asuka or Rei. Like, really, until the Rebuild movies was when I started to understand them, like, as characters, and it totally changed, like, you know, whatever I'd saw before, I was like, they were not what I thought they were. Like, when I watched it the first time, I was just, oh, Asuka's a bitch, you know? And then watching it later, I'm like, she is so far from that, like, such a more interesting, evolved character. And there's lots of people who still do that, who just write her off as, oh, she's a bitch, you know, because they don't get it, but... Yeah. And so have you seen both the Rebuild movies?
I've seen... Okay, so the...
or all three of them, rather. I have forgot there's a third one because I haven't seen it yet.
There's like a third one now, isn't there?
There
very recently. Actually, when I went to go see the Madoka movie, they had a poster up there for Eva 3.0, and I was like,
nice.
I guess I'm going to see that eventually. But...
Yeah, I amazingly have not seen it yet. As I keep
Before I watched the whole season with my friend in the last 10 weeks, probably a year ago, I watched the first two episodes at the first two movies at a LAN party with one of my friends. Everybody else was asleep, but me and him were just watching Eva, basically.
Right.
And, like, sitting there and being like, this is so, like, we just completely didn't understand where it was coming from. Like, they all of them had put it on as, like, this mecha, and we're like, alright, we could watch a mecha, I guess, that's cool. And I remember specifically the whole time, I was thinking to myself, like, man, when is Shinji gonna get with Rei? Because it was, like, this like, assumption that I had that there was a main male character and a main female character, but it just was never clicking, and I was so frustrated with Shinji. Like, Shinji, what are you doing? Even That's more so when Asuka came in. I completely didn't really, like, understand the series at that point. I didn't know anything about its history, anything like that. Just some of the people at the LAN party was like, oh, this is such a great mecha, you should totally watch it. And I was like, okay. So,
yeah, it's interesting. Like, because I went into those movies, you know, knowing all kinds of shit. And it's funny because I'll probably bring this up more in the next podcast, but in the movies, I really felt like, when I watched the second one, I felt like the whole dynamic that they were going for is that Shinji was establishing a family. And that it's like, Misato is the mother, Gendo is supposed to be the father. They're trying to make him a better father. Because he gets a way bigger role in Rebuild 2 than he does really in the early parts of the show. And that Rei is supposed to be his sister, and Asuka is supposed to be his lover. And this would complete, like, a full family. But it's interesting because in the movie, Asuka assumes that he's in love with Rei, and she basically goes off to, like, you know, she's like, I'm going to go off and die or get out of his life, you know, so that he can be with Rei, because she wants to make him happy. And I was like, but no, he's not supposed to be in love with Rei. He's supposed to want to take care of Rei, but that doesn't mean they're in love. They're a family unit, you know, like... So I wrote this huge analysis of that movie, like, from that perspective at the time, which we'll probably talk... If we might even do the Rebuild movies when, like, at some point, so... Yeah, I'll probably talk about that more then, but I'm interested to watch the show now and see if that dynamic that I assumed connects at all. Because in the movie, I'm not sure it was intentional, or that it will be capitalized on. I still haven't seen the third one. I don't know how Shinji and Rei plays out, but I feel like it probably doesn't. And I know in the show that it's always a complex thing. Yeah. And I'll definitely talk about this more, especially when we get to, like, episode 16 or so, which is, like, the first really trippy one, where he's, like, picturing all three of the women in his life, and it's like, what are they supposed to be to him? You know, like, is he in love with them? Is he controlled by his libido? Does he just want to fuck them all, you know? And so I'm really interested to look at that aspect as I watch the show.
That's a good point. You know, I've always approached it, specifically the dynamic between all the characters as that they're all suffering from, like, the same problems, and I don't want to say the same mental problems, but I got this, like, unshakable feeling when I was watching this series the first time that all of the characters were, like, eerily similar and just expressed the ways that they were dealing with the problems in different ways, and that was what made them different characters. And, like, I spoke in the last two podcasts about how I felt there was parallels between the college kids with Katsurugi and Ritsuko to the Eva pilots now, and I think that's true. I still approach it from that framework, and I think that's the way that I'm going to be looking at it is, you know, what are their similarities and what are their differences, like what are the root causes for these things, because that's really what I wanted to dig into. The first time that I watched it, it was this passive experience, and I didn't try to, like, really understand why the characters were acting in certain ways. So that's kind of what I want to get out of this.
I'm glad we're establishing this now, like 4 episodes in, but at least we're establishing it, you know?
Yeah.
Which it's a good place to do so, because this kind of is launching into, like, the first 4 episodes are just Shinji. It's just about him. And we're about to start looking at Rei, and this is where we're going to get, you know, the character dynamics are going to start opening up. Because Shinji's friends, while important in these episodes, not that important for a lot of the show. So the dynamics between him and Rei and him and the other characters are going to be definitely something to look at. So
yeah,
I'd say that about wraps up episode 4.